be your last presentation of the day. Hopefully, it will go smoothly. Um, I do have the pleasure of speaking to you today about combination products. And, kind of before I dive into that, I just want to, let you think for a minute about what we used to do back before Google existed and we had a question where you went to the library, right? And so anytime we wanted to find out more information or get some ideas about how to proceed with a specific idea that we did have, we'd go in and research that in the library and we'd check out some books, get some ideas. So I'm going to kind of hopefully open a little bit of a book for you today on what combination products is, give you a little bit of lessons and some advice on how-tos on combination products. So I'm going to start by providing an overview of how FDA reviews combination products, then move on to giving you some updates and ending finally with best practices for submissions and engagement. So in terms of an overview, we need to talk about what the combination products are. So the combination product definition, center assignment, and then pre-market review of combination products. So what is a combination product? It is composed of two or more different types of medical products. So it has to be two different things, drug and a device, drug and a biologic, device and a biologic, or even all three combined together. And when you have a combination product with the two different types of medical products in it, each component is called a constituent part. So we talk about constituent parts of combination products being the drug constituent and the device constituent if you have a drug device combo. Now there's three different ways you can make a combination product. You can be chemically or physically combined into what we call a single entity, co-packaged or a kit, or sold separately but labeled for use together. So let's dig in a little bit. Single entity combination products, again, chemically or physically combined. So things like an EpiPen, a pre-filled auto-injector with epinephrine, right? Antibody drug conjugates is a drug biologic example, one of the more common ones. Inhalers, IV bags pre-filled with the drug, or transdermal patches for delivery of drug. These are all considered single entity combination products. Co-packaged combination products are, pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're one of the easy ones to tell where you have both a device and the drug and they're just provided together in the same package. It can be something as simple as Tylenol with the oral dosage delivery syringe in it, or they can have, even more complex combinations where you have pre-filled syringes, plus additional devices, plus reconstitution devices and transfer things and fillable cartridges. And all of these things could be all combined together in one package. So that's a combination product. And then the rarer type of combination product, we don't see a lot of these, is the cross-labeled combination product. And this is when the constituent parts are sold separately. They're packaged and distributed separately, but they are labeled for use solely with each other. And one of the more common examples is a reusable light source and a one-time use photoactivated drug. And so in these cases, there's specificity in the label about using these two components only with each other. This is a little bit different than just recommending a general use device for use with the drug. That does not make a combination product. So if a combination product has two different constituents, how do you figure out where in FDA you're going to work on developing that product? Luckily, it's not a choose your own adventure book. We do have some regulations that tell us how you figure that out. And so what we do is we look at primary mode of action for the combination product. And that's defined as the single mode of action that provides the most important therapeutic action for the product. And then we assign based on which constituent part provides that primary mode of action. If it's a drug, the combination goes to CDER. If it's a device, it goes to CDRH. If it's a biologic, it goes to CBER or CDER, depending on the type of biological product it is, because some biological products like monoclonal antibodies are regulated by CDER and not CBER. And then there are times when it's a little bit difficult to tell which constituent part provides the primary mode of action. In that case, we use something called the algorithm and determine assignment based on first consistency. Do we have a product like this already that raises similar questions of safety and effectiveness? If yes, we will assign that similar product to the same center for consistency. If that doesn't exist, if it's really novel, we'll look at it and we'll try to determine where the most significant safety and effectiveness questions lie and which center has the most expertise related to those. And that can be really challenging to tell too, especially if both the device and the drug raise really novel safety and effectiveness questions. So it requires a lot of collaboration and discussion among the centers in those cases. So pre-market review of combination products. Um, It's important to recognize that we assess the safety and effectiveness of the combination product as a whole. We'll look at the individual constituent parts and we'll look at them, how they're used together and how they're put together as a whole. When you're assigned to that lead center based on primary mode of action, that lead center is the primary point of contact for everything related to the combination product. And the combination product will follow that lead center's processes, procedures, applications, et cetera. So for combination products assigned to CDER, you're going to use the IND process, the NDA, the BLA, or the ANDA for your application type, just depending on what's most appropriate for the combination product. If you're in CDRH, you're going to use all of their application types. CBER is a little bit of a special snowflake here because they have both the device application types and biologic applications and drug applications. And so it's really going to depend specifically on what the product is in CBER and the type of application that's appropriate. And then the other thing is that once we have an application or a product assigned to a center, that doesn't mean that you are solely working with that center. The lead center will engage all of the other centers as appropriate to get their expertise so that we're bringing all the expertise to bear on the combination product as a whole. All right, so I'm going to move on to some updates. Unfortunately, I don't think these updates are necessarily quite as exciting as finding a new book on the shelf at the bookstore, but we do get pretty happy when we finally finish hard work on something and get that out in the public eye. So starting with the guidance on regulatory considerations for prescription drug use software. This is something we affectionately call PDURS, which stands for Prescription Drug Use Related Software. And what it is software that is disseminated by or on behalf of a drug sponsor and produces end user output that supplements, explains, or is otherwise textually related to one or more of the sponsor's drug products, regardless of whether the software is a device. I know that's a mouthful, and we'll talk it through a little bit. So the draft guidance essentially describes how we're going to apply our labeling authority to the outputs of certain types of software. And then it also describes what we're going to do to determine whether some of that output gets described in the prescribing information or whether it's simply considered promotional labeling. If it's going to be in the prescribing information, how are we going to describe it? What are we going to do? And then how you should submit information about that end user output to the agency. So importantly, the guidance isn't changing our definitions of required or promotional labeling. We're just applying those definitions to the output of software. So required drug labeling is the labeling drafted by the manufacturer that's reviewed and approved by FDA, and it includes the information essential for a provider to make an informed decision about the risks and benefits of prescribing the drug. And for the patient to successfully and safely and effectively use the drug. Promotional labeling is generally any other labeling other than FDA required labeling that's devised for promotion of the product. And that can include printed, audio, or visual matter that's descriptive of the drug that is disseminated by or on behalf of the drug's manufacturer, packer, or distributor. And so that's important key as well. So just a few highlights from the draft guidance. Whether or not something is a PDURS, whether or not something, the output of a certain software is PDURS is independent of device status. So don't have a lot of time to go into all of the intricacies of when FDA does and doesn't regulate software. There's a lot of guidances out of CDRH, but just recognize that there are some software functions that are device functions that FDA regulates. There are some software functions that are not device functions, and we don't regulate those. And so the output of the software, depending on whether it's a device function or not a device function, could still be PDURS. So it's regardless of device status. When we're trying to decide if that information gets put into required labeling or promotional labeling, we're going to consider whether the function is essential to the safe and effective use of the product, whether there's an evidence of clinical benefit from use of that software, and whether it relies on data transferred directly from a device constituent of a combination product. The guidance also explains when and how to submit that PDURS information to FDA. And again, this clarifies it does not apply to software developers that are not affiliated with the drug sponsor. So third party, this doesn't apply to them. Now, as I said, the output could be PDURS, but the software may meet the definition of a device. So you have both cases here. In those cases, you may need to submit a device application for something that is also a PDURS. So what that means is that when CDRH is reviewing that device application, they're also going to consider questions related to the representations about the drug, and they're going to consult with CDER or CBER as appropriate for that. That means that if the output of that device is PDURS promotional labeling, then you would not necessarily need to submit a Form 2253. This is what we have in the draft guidance right now. But if you make changes to that PDURS and you don't need a new 510K because the changes didn't require a new 510K to CDRH, then you would submit that information on the Form 2253. And regardless, the 2253 is not a replacement for the device marketing submission and vice versa. So 2 examples here. The first on the left is a medication tracker. So it is tracking when injections are given. This is not a CDRH regulated device, but it is PDURS when the promotional labeling is in there by or on behalf of the sponsor. If it's displaying the name of the drug and may be considered part of an integrated system. So the 2253 might be appropriate in this case. On the right side is a dose calculator. The dose calculator is a device, and it might need a 510K. If it is also marketed by or on behalf of the drug sponsor, then it would also be considered PDURS promotional labeling and would need to follow those requirements as well. Again, if it's not marketed on by or on behalf, it's not PDURS. All right, moving on to another hot topic. I'm not going to spend any time on this really because you had a wonderful talk full of AI. I just want to point out that, again, combination products are in the AI space as well. And so this publication was published and it covers, these 4 different areas of focus about how we are working on AI. And so as you heard from Tala, combination products is right in there as well. The next guidance that I want to talk about is the compliance policy for certain ophthalmic products and Part 4. Now, to talk about this guidance, I first have to tell you about a court decision called what we call the Genus decision. In brief, several years ago, a case went to court about whether barium sulfate contrast imaging agents were devices or drugs. And the court decided that FDA does not have the discretion to regulate something that meets the definition of a device as a drug. So if something meets the device definition, it must be regulated as a device. And their decision was broader than just that of the contrast agent at issue in there. Fortunately, Congress later clarified that in Section 503 that any contrast agent, radioactive drug, or OTC monograph drug is deemed a drug and not a device. So that removed some of that regulatory uncertainty with those products that resulted as a result of the court case decision. So what does this have to do with ophthalmic products? Well, there was this odd exception in the regulation talking about devices packaged with drugs. Now, you heard me say devices packaged with drugs, chemically combined or in a co-package or combination products, right? 200.50C had some language that didn't jive with what I told you earlier. And it said specifically, eye cups, eye droppers, and other dispensers intended for ophthalmic use are regulated as drugs if packaged with the drugs with which they are to be used. So that was this weird thing happening there, right? Combination products, if it's an eardropper, not a combination product if it's an eyedropper. Genus removed that regulatory like uncertainty, or not uncertainty there, but that regulatory exception. And so we now are regulating those eye cups, eye droppers, and other dispensers as devices, meaning that when they're combined with the drug, they are drug device combination products. So in doing that, That meant that manufacturers had to change what they were thinking about with these and stop thinking about them as drugs, start thinking about them as combination products, and apply the combination product regulatory scheme to that, including 21 CFR Part 4, which provides for CGMP requirements and post-market safety reporting requirements for combination product. So the guidance explains our approach to calling them combination products now, and also provided a 12-month grace period where we were not applying any action with respect to those because they were not previously regulated as combination product. That period actually ended a year ago. Um, the other important thing about that guidance that is still in effect is that it's explained that for lower risk device constituent parts, like those really simple drop tainers and ampules that administer the drug directly to the eye, FDA is actually still evaluating how the 820 requirements for quality systems are going to apply to those device constituent parts. And so we don't intend to take any action with respect to non-compliance with the 820 requirements for those types of combination products. Instead, we're going to continue thinking about it, figure out what we're going to do, publish some current thinking when we get there, and then provide some timing expectations to come into compliance depending on what the outcome is. Now, really helpfully for that, CDRH held a panel meeting about ophthalmic devices in November of 2022 to talk about and make recommendations on the classification of ophthalmic dispensers under the CDRH device classification scheme, which is class 1, 2, or 3 based on the risk of the product. And so they talked about classification of these. There was a recommendation at the end that they be class 1 exempt devices, but not GMP exempt. So as CDRH moves forward with their thinking on how to move on from that panel meeting and what to do next, some of the outcomes of that will certainly inform our thinking about what Part 4 requirements are going to apply when these devices are parts of combination products. Next up is a guidance on the application of human factors engineering principles for combination products. Um, this guidance is a final guidance. We're very excited this went out. It is not replacing either the CDRH or the CDER human factors guidance that exists for standalone drugs or devices. It's in a question and answer format, so we find that to be a little bit helpful. And what it does is clarify how the unique aspects of a combination product influence the considerations with respect to the HIV process for these products. So importantly, the user interface for a combination product includes all points of interaction between the combination product and the user, including displays, controls, packaging, product labels, carton labeling, instructions for use, and even training if applicable. And so when looking at a combination product, we want you to be considering the use-related risks associated with the combination product as a whole, especially those that do not exist for the device alone or the drug alone, so where that convergence is of the combination product. And then apply that in looking at what is needed from a human factors perspective. So the Q&A guidance includes items such as definitions of what is a final finished combination product. Well, that's the to be marketed product. It's best to do your human factors validation studies on that to be marketed product. So we talk about the timing necessary for that. Talks about how to identify what is a combination product critical task. The difference between a use-related risk analysis and other risk analyses. So, a URA is essentially a subset of the overall engineering risk analysis that is done for a device. So you can get more information about our thinking on that in the guidance as well. And finally, the last guidance update I want to give is about controlled correspondence related to generic drug development. And this is a helpful guidance for developers of generic combination products because it provides information about the process that they can get for getting information from FDA about their drug development plan. And that's through submitting something called a controlled correspondence. So the guidance provides details and recommendations about what inquiries are appropriate to come in as a controlled correspondence. And helpfully for combination product developers, that includes questions related to the evaluation of the user interface of a drug device combination product. And so questions about combination products may be appropriate in a controlled correspondence. The guidance will go into more details about that, as well as explaining when it's appropriate to submit them in a single controlled versus two separate controlled correspondence, depending on what the questions are and whether they're related to separate elements of the generic drug development plan. Okay, and so that takes me to the third section of my talk today. Like I said, I'm going to give you a little bit of a how-to and then point you to some other documents that you can use for a little bit of self-help. So first thing, before you engage with FDA on any product development, you want to be sure that you know if your product is a combination product or not, and you want to know where the product belongs, and which center it goes to. If that's ever not clear, you have a couple of different options. One of them is to take the pre-RFD or RFD route. That's called a request for designation. I'm sorry, I didn't, oh, I guess it's spelled out in the guidance at the bottom. A pre-RFD as a pre-request for designation or an RFD. And that is done through the Office of Combination Products. If you're not ready to put together a full pre-RFD or RFD document, you can always engage with one of the center product jurisdiction officers, one of them, for confirmation on where the product belongs. And it's also important, you do not need a pre-RFD or an RFD. It's only when there's uncertainty. Don't send us an RFD for a pre-filled syringe. You're going to CEDAR, okay? The pre-RFD, the difference between that and the RFD is the pre-RFD is not binding. It offers a more informal decision, although we do write down all of the reasons why we're giving you the decision we're giving you. There is a little bit more of an interactive process with that because there is not a firm deadline. There is a goal of getting responses back within 60 days. So we do strive for that. But because it can be a longer document, or we might do some more interactions, it could exceed that amount of time. An RFD, on the other hand, is a binding decision. It's best used when the product is already pretty well characterized and configured, like you're going to put it in a co-package. That way we know you're going to be a combination co-package. But if you're like, well, I don't know which device I'm going to use yet, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it, and that might be a little too early to tell if you're a combination product or not. It is not interactive. After the RFD is filed, we only have 60 days to issue that letter. That 60 days includes a lot of review time by the Office of Combination Products, review time by the center product jurisdiction officers, review time by center subject matter experts when appropriate. And so there is not a lot of time there. 60 days sounds long, but it really isn't. And the requirements for that are in our regulations, and there's guidance documents available on both of those. Okay, once you do know which center you're going to work through, and this goes back to what I said on one of the earlier slides, you're going to work through the center-based mechanism of the lead center to get feedback on the combination product. So if you're in CDRH, you're using their Q submission program or their Q sub program, and they have several different ways that you submit through that and different types of Q subs depending on the nature of the inquiry. If you're in CEDAR, you're going to follow our formal meeting guidance depending on the product that you're developing. So if it's a PDUFA product, you follow that guidance. If you're a biosimilar, you're following the BsUFA guidance. If you're generic, there's guidances based on meetings on complex products or meetings on product-specific guidances. And then there's this overarching guidance document that really points to all of these other guidance documents that already exist, talking about more explicitly requesting feedback on combination products and what is helpful in there. And so some of the best practices identified in that guidance include, again, submit all your meeting requests to the lead center, even if all of the questions are about the non-lead center constituent part. Why? Well, you only have questions about this really novel device, but it's going to be pre-filled with the drug, and we want to keep all of that information in the same file, and we don't want to be trying to find information in one file in one center, information in another file in another center, and trying to put the pieces together when ultimately it's going to be a single entity combination product. Again, all communications should be through the assigned point of contact. That way we can keep that administrative record very clear and have that information so we can go back and look at it. If 5 years later you say, hey, this happened, I talked to so-and-so, and we don't have that in the record because you didn't go through the primary point of contact. Also, clearly identified as a combination product. You would think that's obvious, and there is a check mark in the 356H or the 1571 forms for you to tell us it's a combination product, but don't just do it there. Put it in the cover letter or put it in the summary of what the product is. Tell us up front it's a combination product. There's nothing worse than looking through a pre-IND meeting request and finding out on page 150 that you're planning to do this device because we've just spent a lot of time not consulting CDRH because we didn't know until we got to page 150 that you were planning this device. Again, this is obvious for pretty much any area of product development, but ask specific questions related to the appropriate stage of product development. A lot of times we are looking at sponsors who want to start bridging from a prefilled syringe to an auto-injector or something when they're changing their device midstream. So ask us those questions. Let us know that you're planning to do that. And then as you get to the point where you're starting to get ready to do that, then ask us the more specific questions about the appropriate way to do that. Provide sufficient information for FDA to consider. If you're just saying, well, I'm going to use this with this device, this auto injector, but you don't describe the auto injector, you don't explain anything about it, it's really hard for us to then send that to CDRH and say, hey, there's an auto injector here. Can you give us feedback? And they're going to say, no, there's no information. They should, do device stuff with the auto injector, right? So provide us enough information so we can give you constructive feedback. It's also really helpful if you are to have multiple development programs going on and you're using the same device across multiple programs, let us know that. So if you're submitting a pre-IND meeting request because you've got a pre-filled syringe for a drug, keep using pre-filled syringes, but those are the easy ones. Pre-filled syringe for a drug, and you're like in the anesthesia division, and then you've got the same device, and you're using that in the oncology division. Let us know that so that we can leverage the information from the relative files, make sure that we're being consistent in the information we're giving you. It's very helpful if we know that that same device is being used elsewhere because we can look back at some of that information that we already have on file. Also, a lot of devices might be 510K cleared or PMA approved before they get added to a combination product. And so if we have that information, that can be helpful as well, especially if it's in a clinical trial or an IND setting. If you're telling us you're going to use a specific device for delivery of your drug, that you may not be developing a combination product necessarily, but if you're using a specialized catheter that's only for delivery to one part of the body and it's only cleared for that, but now you're trying to use it for delivery to another part of the body, we might need to take another look at that device. But having the 510K number, the clearance number, really helps us confirm that the device is appropriate for the use that it's being used for in that study, or if we need additional information about the combined use of the drug and device. So FDA promises to identify a primary point of contact. You get that every time you reach out. Provide timely communication. We have goals under all of these review programs. We work very hard to meet all of those goals. We will engage the relevant expertise from the other centers when needed. And again, that's why it's really helpful if you tell us up front you have a combination product. We'll provide comprehensive feedback as best we can based on the current thinking at the time and the information that you provided. And you can request certain staff and be included in those meetings. It's especially helpful if, in addition to saying, hey, I have a combination product, say, hey, I think CDRH might want to be at this meeting too. Like, tell us that. That does help us. And you can also request that the Office of Combination Products or the center's PJO staff attend those meetings as well. And we can provide helpful assistance in those. Okay, so up to the challenge questions. You are developing a novel implantable device that is pre-filled with the drug, and that drug was approved for the same indication years ago and is a well-understood drug. Which center, I went too fast. Which center is responsible for the combination product? Well, I hope you were going to say CDER, because that's the way where it goes. I didn't even think I hit a button. Oh, wait, it's moving by itself. Why is it doing that? I didn't move it. I wasn't even touching it. Anyway, the device is pre-filled with the drug. It is a novel device. We've never seen it before. Drug is well understood. It's still a pre-filled drug device combination product. It still goes to CDER. Challenge question number 2. If you have an approved combination product in CDER, for example, an NDA, who would you ask about the type of supplement needed if you're making a change to the device constituent of the combination product? Would you ask the Office of Combination Products? Would you ask CDER? Oh, again, I didn't touch it. I didn't know I had a timer on these. Anyway, you ask CDER. Don't ask CDRH. CDRH doesn't know anything about NDA supplements. CDER will decide what is the appropriate type of what is the appropriate type of NDA supplement that would be needed. They might consult with CDRH because they want to make sure that the supplement type is commensurate with the type of review required. So if you're making a pretty significant device change, a CBE 0 is probably not appropriate. Maybe it's a prior approval supplement, maybe it's a CBE 30. It really just is going to depend on what that change is. Okay, now move without me. If you have questions, when you're in the library, you ask the librarian. When you're at FDA or needing to work with FDA, you ask us. You can talk to me. My address is up here. All of the center product jurisdiction officers have their own address. It's really easy to remember. It's CBER, or CDRH, product jurisdiction at FDA.gov, and that will get you to the product jurisdiction officers. I promise you, we are in those mailboxes multiple times a day. So your email is not going unseen. It's not going into a black hole. If you email those. And the same with the Office of Combination Products, combination at FDA.gov. That is not a typo. They don't have the HHS in their name. I don't know why. And thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I guess.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. A question related to guidance documents. The Combo Product Summit last fall, the FDA mentioned there was work being done towards a guidance that would include something about essential performance.
Essential performance requirements, yes.
An update?
Yes, I am very excited that that will be coming out this year. Yeah. I can't say when, but it is. That's to say it's imminently by the end of the fiscal year, so not even the end of the calendar year, you should see it. Probably well in time to talk about at the Combo Summit. No promises.
Can you share with us where to find the latest FDA guidance on combination products that incorporate nanomaterials? For example, an IV administered drug comprising of a nanoparticle carrier plus a covalently linked therapeutic agent. In this case, is the nanoparticle a drug or a device?
Excellent question. And it's going to depend. It's going to be very product specific on what that nanoparticle is, whether it has additional functions or whether it's, really just part of the carrier the same way, saline is a diluent. So that would have to be something we'd look at on a product specific basis. And all the guidance can be found just searching FDA guidance. I don't think there's one specific to that question.
I'm expected to do a performance now. Speaking about guidances, we have thank you, Jeff. We have quite a slew of guidances out there on our exhibit table. Those were pertinent to presentations from today's schedule. So if anyone catches your eye, please feel free to take them home with you and give them a good home. Okay, next question online, please.
What is the threshold for determining if PDURS meets software as a medical device requirements? Should industry refer to guidance on mobile medical applications, device software functions, and clinical decision support software?
Yes, all of the above. So as I said, PDURS is separate from device status. So if you want to know if something is a device and it's software, you are going to refer to all of those CDRH guidance documents, which will tell you which ones are devices, which ones are devices that are subject to enforcement discretion, meaning we don't need to see an application for them, and which ones require an application. And then depending on if you are buyer on behalf of the drug sponsor, the output of that is PDURS, or yes, if you're on buyer, is PDURS, regardless of whether you meet one of the device definitions.
Next question, please.
If an investigational assay is being used for patient selection in a drug clinical trial, what kind of regulation and processes does the sponsor need to follow and how to get more advice?
So I would recommend in that case, so that's not necessarily a combination product, but it is a co-development, sounds like a co-development of an in vitro diagnostic and a drug. And questions about that can be directed to CDER as part of a pre-IND meeting request, or to CDRH as just to ask questions about the assay itself. Depending on what it is, you may need to have both an IND and an IDE in CDER and CDRH for a drug and a diagnostic.
Next online question, please.
If leveraging an approved drug device combination product for a new indication, so no change in dose or route of administration, how should a sponsor approach risk in terms of human factor studies?
That's an excellent question. And so again, it's a new indication, but same drug and device, correct? That was the question?
Yes,
Yes, new indication.
new indication, no change in dose or route of administration.
Yep. Yeah, so that is one of the things that the human factors guidance talks about. I think it gives an example of a case like that, but you are considering when you're looking at use-related risk, you're considering not just the drug and the device and the dose and route of administration, but also the patient population. And so if you, and the context of use, so whether it's an emergency use versus a non-emergency use is going to matter. So even if the product is the same, if you're changing from emergency to non-emergency, you're going to have some differences in critical tasks that might be there. So you need to go through that use-related risk analysis.
Thank you. Next online question, please.
Does the FDA plan to update post-approval guidance for drugs/biologics to include device constituent changes, such as auto-injector or pre-filled syringes?
I do not know the answer to that question. I know that we have been working on a guidance about post-approval changes for combination products specifically, but that has been in the works for many years and hasn't made a lot of progress.
Let's take two more, please. Online questions.
Who do we talk to about bridging approach for the auto-injector used across multiple different drug molecules as the drug sponsor?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenging questions, and it's a really good idea to where you are in your development program, wherever you're first going to attempt that bridge, to include information telling us that you're doing this in other development programs and what your plan is, and we may be able to provide you advice that across a little bit more of that in just one. It's also a good time to just reach out to the Office of Combination Products and talk in some generalities about the bridging. That is definitely something that we have a lot of questions about. I will just also mention that there is a draft bridging guidance out there, and we are working through the comments that were received and working towards hopefully putting that guidance out in final at some point.
Last question, please.
If there will be an FDA inspection on a combination product managed by Office of Combination Projects, which agency will complete the FDA inspection?
Right. So if it's a combination product, the lead center will work with the non-lead center constituent to decide what type of inspection needs to be had. And they're going to look at the information that's submitted in the application about the manufacturing facilities, the type of facility it is, and determine what inspection type needs to go out there. And then there is a guide for inspectors for doing those combination product inspections.
Okay, that's our last question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Lauritsen.
Thank you.